Welcome to 3 o'clock with SOC. Give me a second while I welcome our Spanish speaking neighbors, and I'll be right back with you. Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a las 3 p.m. con SOC hoy día. Por favor, marquen el número que aparece en la pantalla si quieren oír el programa en su idioma en español. Van a estar llamando un teléfono de conferencia, una llamada de conferencia. Cuando le aceptan la llamada, por favor, comparte el clave que aparece en la pantalla o la contraseña, que es 627-682. El número de teléfono es 425-436-6200 y el clave otra vez es 627-682. Gracias. Welcome this Friday, April 10th, to 3 o'clock with SOC, our community forum online via Facebook Live. My name is Tammy Rivera. I'm the executive director and lead organizer for Southside Organizing Center. Today, as we have done since the day after the election, is a special edition of our community forum where we're bringing on leaders and subject matter experts to help make sense of the election that occurred on Tuesday. Before we start the show, I want to share a disclaimer. The views and opinions shared today don't necessarily reflect those of SOC. We want people to have a voice and make space for that, for our leadership and others to share their thoughts and make suggestions and recommendations. The forum today will be these announcements. We'll have a very special guest with us today that we attempted to have on Wednesday, but we were having technical difficulties with our software. So he was gracious enough to join us today. Hopefully we'll hear from him soon, which is Pedro Colon, Judge Pedro Colon, and I'll talk a little more about him in a little bit. Please know that SOC is here for you. We haven't missed a day since this situation started. All of our staff was equipped with technology. We're trained and have been supported to work virtually from home. So you can connect with us in all the same ways you used to, except for we can't see you in person quite yet. And we are looking forward to the ability to do that. Again, as you know, our grassroots organizing and all of the rest of our programs and services take place mostly by knocking on your doors, giving you a visit, having forums and events and activities, seeing you in the community, in gatherings, and in all kinds of other ways. And so we're trying to take all the work we used to do in person and convert that virtually and digitally by phone calling and emails and this venue here, video conferencing, and we will continue to do that. With that being said, you can contact us in a bunch of different ways. You can call us still at the same number, 414-672-8090, 414-672-8090. Gladys is manning our phones for us during this community forum, and you can call her with your questions or concerns. You can email us at soc@socmilwaukee.org, and you can communicate with us through any of our social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we highly encourage you to communicate with us here in the comment section of this Facebook Live. Please know that we are appreciative of your presence and time with us, and we have an incentive for you to show up here with us, as we know you're trying to manage how to meet your basic needs, and many of you are homeschooling your children and just trying to make life happen during this time. So we have a daily drawing of a $25 gift certificate. And each day, someone wins that for participating with us here in our community forum. And every time that you engage with us, it enters you into the drawing. So let me share with you all the ways that you can enter the drawing. You can like this Facebook Live, you can share it, you can provide a comment or a question in the chat. You can make a suggestion. Our regularly scheduled program I'll talk about in a little bit. But if you make a suggestion for the segment that we're holding for viewers' choice or resident choice on what type of topics you would like us to cover, and some of them may not be the serious matter we're talking about in these days, but you may want to know how to start an herb garden or get a rain barrel or where to go to get emergency house repairs or rehab loans, etc. And so we want to make sure that we take your suggestions and create a segment around that that meets your needs. You can also enter by demonstrating that you voted. Now we respect all the people who chose to stay safer at home and not come out for the election. But if you did come out for the election and have a photo of you at the site, you can share that with us and that'll enter you into the drawing. And if you completed the census already, you can screenshot the confirmation. It doesn't share your personal information, it just confirms it. And you can confirm that with us, and that'll enter you into the drawing. And then every day we're doing a survey um, to we have a survey for you to provide us input into there is the connection there, the link to SurveyMonkey, and all the information that I'm sharing. Please don't feel rushed or that you missed it, because it will also appear in the comments for this Facebook Live, and you can see the link and any resources or information that I share with you. So if you go to that link and fill out a survey, it's only 3 or 4 questions. Like, what did you find useful? What should we change? Any other comments? Did the information we provide you, help you? Did it give you information and resources that can help you have a better quality of life? Really, 3 or 4 quick questions for you to answer, and you'll be entered into the drawing. Those are all the different ways that you can enter the drawing. Later on in the show, we're going to announce who won from yesterday's drawing, and we've been doing that every day as well. Today's topic, let me get a drink of water because I feel a cough coming on. Thank you for being patient with me. Today's show, the topic is the why to yesterday's election. Oh, and it's not yesterday's anymore. Now we're on Friday. So it was the why to Tuesday's election. And what we're really trying to figure out here, we've had so much discussion and emotions and disappointment about what took place on Tuesday. But what we're trying to provide is a venue to examine what were the systems, the processes, the people and their authority which held that election on Tuesday, despite the risk of the coronavirus, and despite the safer at home order, which contradicts us gathering in mass. So that's the topic that we're going to be discussing today. As soon as we can get our guest on, I'll do a little more introduction, but just so you know, Judge Pedro Colon, who was also a former state representative, is going to share his thoughts and help us try to get through all the questions and concerns that we have been sharing together for the last several days. I'm going to go ahead and list all of the things we've been capturing from you. And please, if you have more questions and concerns that I didn't share of the questions and concerns earlier, please, tell us, oh, like I want to know this, or I'm really concerned about that, or what's going to happen now. So I'm going to share those things, with you after I say hello and see some of the comments here. So Malda Colon says, very, very informative. Thank you. Felix is joking and saying he voted twice. We know he didn't. And Felix Gestel won the certificate yesterday. So we're happy you're back, Felix. Glad you won yesterday. Felix is a very active resident in the community. Okay, I am going to try to share. It's 2 pages, but I think it's really important. You know, iron sharpens iron, right? The saying goes. And so here are some of the questions surrounding what took place at the election. And I see on my cell phone here in the conversation that our guest is attempting to get on with us, and we should see him shortly. Hopefully, because if you've been with us since last Friday, you see our struggle here of trying to get your guests on so that you can see them and hear them. And what we heard from the software company is the not anticipated mass of people having to go virtual is causing some stress on systems, and therefore it's proving challenging to us. But you know, we've been able to roll with the punches, and so we've been bringing people on by phone, or sometimes you just hear them, or sometimes you just see them, or both. So we're gonna have some confidence that that we're gonna be able to bring Pedro to you today. Okay, the whys to Tuesday's election. Folks want to know why the greatest concern of every person, elected and administrative, wasn't the health and life of Wisconsinites. Why wasn't that the overriding concern? And why were folks having to choose between their own personal health and safety, that of their families, their life, and the right to vote? Because doesn't the right to vote and who you elect ultimately impact your health and even, you know, safety, life? And so people were feeling like keeping people safe should have been the primary concern over all political fights, etc. Why aren't there provisions in place already for if a situation um, like this were to occur? Because we have natural disasters in this country, um, and you know, especially when you think after 9/11, you would think that there were already, you know, plan B, plan C, plan D for elections in the event folks can't vote for whatever reason, for a short period of time because of like the coronavirus, or for a longer period of time, or different ways to vote. Why doesn't that already exist, given the hundreds of years that we exist on as a country, and then our own existence as Milwaukee for more than a century? I forget what our anniversary is these days because it hasn't been a big one this year. Um, why couldn't the elections? Why couldn't the elections have been postponed? Are there laws, or like what's the problem with having to have postponed it, since everything else, the DNC, Summerfest, all other things are being postponed? Why couldn't something as critical as participating in our democracy, the way of life here, been postponed? Even if you had to do it, why are we not getting um why are we not getting that opportunity to do it later? We're not getting the same consideration for voting rights. I'm sorry, and I say this every day, I am trying to manage the messages coming in about the guest and talking to you. This is just like you're at the dinner table, you know, everybody talking over everybody, but you can't hear the other people. Only I can. So why couldn't it be postponed? And then why can't you share the reasons? There seems to be like an obligation people are dismissing here is to inform the public about what the whys of why decisions were made. Another question. Why was Madison able to have 66 polls open with I believe they have a smaller population than we do, or maybe equivalent, and we only have 5? Like, how did that happen? And they reportedly didn't have like all the lines that we do. Well, of course, if you do the math, then it's because of the polls, but why couldn't that happen? Why was a polling site allowed to exist in the epicenter of where the coronavirus is growing so immensely? Anytime, Johnny, you can put Pedro on. Johnny, for those of you who are listening, is our production consultant. Anytime you can get the guest on, go ahead. Hola, Pedro. Can you hear me?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy you're here with us.
I'm so happy I was able to navigate all this great technology to get here.
Honest to goodness, I don't
It's
know how
easier
we
to ride
stayed
a
this
bike.
quick. After this, it'll be as easy as riding a bike for us. But right now, I'm challenged with you, hermano. I was just sharing. Welcome, Judge Pedro Colon. Uh, Pedro was our state representative for how many years? Over 10, no?
About 10, a little over 10, yes, about a
Yeah, a
decade.
little over 10. And he was also our first Latino ex elected official in Wisconsin, if I'm correct as well.
That's correct.
And so we're very grateful that you could be here with us. The topic of the show today is why, capital WH, why, of the elections on Tuesday. And what we're really trying to find out as a community here is what were the systems, the processes, the people and their authority that allowed the elections? I'll quickly give you some topics that people are wanting to know about that maybe you can shed light on. One is who has the authority, ultimate authority? So we saw the struggle, the fight between the governor and the legislature. Had the Wisconsin Supreme Court not ruled, which one of those two orders, like which has the greater power? Then
Well,
between
I thought it
between
was
the
convoluted.
pardon me?
I thought it was interesting the way it developed. I think what the governor tried to do was to engage the legislature in a special session. And when I was in the legislature, we engaged in those in great times of need. There would be budget shortfalls, and any kind of emergency that the governor wanted to address, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat, they used that power. We would convene and we would address whether it was a shortfall in revenues. I know in 2009 we had the Great Recession occur, and so we had to meet at those times. So the governor said, well, this is a time that is so serious that we should have the special session, emergency session, to see if we can postpone the election or somehow accommodate the pandemic uh, so that we can all exercise our rights to vote while at the same time having a safe election. The legislature apparently immediately adjourned and did not meet and indicated that the governor had that authority. The governor then, the day before the election, understanding that the legislature would give him that authority, um, essentially adjourned or postponed the election to a date in June 20th, I believe. And at that time, the understanding was that there was a federal court lawsuit in Madison that was proceeding. That lawsuit, the judge in that lawsuit indicated over and over again that he did not have the authority to suspend the election, and only the legislature or the governor could. Well, the governor, as we all know now, said, we're going to postpone the election. I'm exercising that authority that the legislature indicated I had, or that they wished to not exercise. And then the legislature, at least the Republicans in the legislature, immediately appealed to the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. And in what we all know now was a decision from the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. They indicated that he did not have his that the power to enact emergency state of emergency decisions did not cover the date in which we were to have the election, and the election should proceed. As importantly, the U.S. Supreme Court then indicated that if the lawsuit in Madison said, well, if we are not going to change the date of the election, we're going to make some accommodations. One of which was to enlarge the time by which the absentee ballots could be received, so that they would get out to people and people could get them in. And those people that you saw on the election day that had not received those ballots or had not requested them would have a greater window by which to request them, and they would not have to appear in person. The Supreme Court of the United States said that that was unallowed, and essentially said that it would not make any accommodations based on the pandemic. So that was sort of the ultimate power of the courts, and they exercised it in a way in which we were all required to vote under a pandemic. That's essentially what occurred. We all know what happened. We're all greatly disappointed. It was the worst birthday gift I've ever gotten in my life. It was April 7th.
Oh,
and
no.
Although I have to respect the Supreme Court of the United States, and I respect the Supreme Court of Wisconsin and the reasons for doing it, I also was gravely disappointed knowing how that would affect, for example, the district I used to represent, where we are, I believe we're still the most densely populated district in the state. And so, all trying to stay safe. I have to say, as I walk around the neighborhood with my dog and the errands I have to run, I think everybody is doing their best to stay away from each other and comply to the extent that they're able. So to me, it was as a citizen, not as a lawyer or a judge, it was disappointing to see all those people out, knowing full well that that was a situation that was not healthy, that it wasn't fair to put them out there. And so that's what we have. I mean, that's ultimately what occurred. Now we're going to see challenges to all kinds of, but those are to come, and we'll see what those are.
So let me make sure I followed you, because that was a lot of activity between four bodies: the governor, the legislature, the state Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court. The back and forth, let's get to the governor declaring or ordering that the elections were postponed. Then the legislatures, some of the leadership of the legislature appealed to the Wisconsin Supreme Court to not allow that date to be postponed.
Correct.
And what did the Wisconsin state legislature point to as the reason for not allowing it to be postponed? Is it back to because the governor could not call a state of an emergency?
Well, I mean, the state of emergency is allowed under the Constitution. You should convene governor. And the way they interpreted it said, well, it's not whether you convene something. So look, I don't believe that the framers of the United States Constitution, nor the Constitutional Convention in 1847-48 in Wisconsin ever envisioned a pandemic. Although you could argue the Black Plague,
I was going to say they lived some.
Other things
they
had
lived
occurred in the Middle Ages, and after the Constitution was enacted in the state, there was the Spanish flu, as it was called, in 1918. So they were definitely presidents, but I don't think the Constitution sort of envisioned that. And so the issue was whether the governor, under a pandemic, the one that we have, the one we're seeing today, could essentially postpone the election. The Supreme Court said no, he could not. And that was based on the authority that the governor has statutorily when he declares a state of emergency, and constitutionally what the Constitution says. And the Constitution essentially has an amendment that says if in times of great discord, and of course they imagine either great sort of catastrophic loss by weather or something like that, or war, then you could sort of move government. But it didn't allow him to essentially postpone the election. Now, there are people that would disagree with that. Obviously, there was a dissent, and
Yes.
the dissent essentially said that a week before, the Supreme Court had ordered all jury trials postponed in criminal and civil cases. Jury trials obviously come, especially in criminal cases, you have a right to a timely jury trial, what we call a speedy trial request, which is a constitutional requirement. Those were postponed due to the pandemic.
Mhm.
So the dissent by Justice N. Walsh Bradley argued, look, if you have to postpone court proceedings because you can't gather jurors in one room, why wouldn't the same rationale apply to gathering a bunch of people to form a line and go to vote? But they didn't see that difference as being applicable in this case.
Hmm. Interesting. So now another scenario in terms of authority. So we've talked about the governor, the legislature, Wisconsin Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. Was there room for the public health department at any level, municipal, state, federal, to step in and declare like a national public health crisis or whatever term, and say we're not allowing groupings of people to gather in public facilities, which would have stopped the election? Is there any room there for them to have superseded the court in areas of national health?
I think that's what the governor. I watched the press conference with the governor where he had his legal counsel and he had his health, the Wisconsin Department of Health secretary by his side, and he was essentially, what I think he did is he relied on all the information from the health department and essentially said we cannot go on with an election. Obviously, due to the pandemic, people will have to be together. People will be frightened to go to vote. Those that vote will be exposed. So you can imagine sort of down the line sort of things that Milwaukee has been dealing with. Poll workers, I can tell you in my ward, and I've been voting in this ward now for 10, 20 years. I don't believe that there isn't anyone who's over 60 that works in those wards. That's the most vulnerable part of the population. I suspect that those good people that I had seen for 20 years come and go on every election called the city and said, not this time.
Yeah.
I can't do it this time.
Yeah.
I suspect that went on all over the city, where the Elections Commission had been relying on elderly retired people, and that's almost like Milwaukee history. I don't ever remember when wards were being staffed by people other than retired people who could sit from 7 in the morning until 8 at night, and they would make a day out of it. They knew all the requirements. And those people were not going to show up. And I can tell you, if it was my mother, if it was my aunt, my mother, I would say, no way are you getting anywhere near a polling site. No, not this time. So that was the context for a lot of what occurred. In fact, not long before the election, the city actually posted that they needed workers and they were willing to pay. I don't know how that went. I don't have information regarding how many workers actually volunteered to be paid to do or went to be paid for this. But I can tell you that I was not going to have anybody in my household go
No.
work.
So
Not
it's
given the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Not even the
No,
who?
I just think given the numbers, the rise, the great the severity of what is continuing to occur as we speak today, that I don't know that any person who lives in the near south side could say we could have a sound election.
Yeah.
Uh, but maybe things are different from other perspectives.
So then it makes the question of the Madison versus Milwaukee polls like a huge mystery. Why was Madison able to open 66 polls and Milwaukee only 5? Right? I mean, I don't expect you to have an answer, but how could that be such a drastic difference in bordering large communities, right?
No, I agree, and I've had the thoughts. I don't know what the voting conditions are, and as I said, in Milwaukee, we rely on usually retired, therefore over 60, over 65 years of age people to do the work of the bulk of the work of the elections.
Mm.
That has been the tradition since I started running for office 20 years ago in every part of the city, because I've ran races in every part of this city and this county.
Well, I'm wondering,
I
is
think
this
a
a
lot of the
place?
clerks in other counties
Go ahead. Clerks in other counties, you were
now,
saying?
in terms of Madison, I'm sorry, other
You were
counties
saying,
had the same concern.
okay.
I think, I'm speculating. I don't know, but I
Mhm.
suspect in Madison, being in a university town, there are people that have greater flexibility in the type of work that they do, that you can actually pull it off.
Mhm.
Madison is a completely demographically different city than Milwaukee. I know that people want to compare it, and it is a point of comparison, but I think we should compare ourselves to Ohio also, where they did suspend the election.
Mhm.
And they suspended the election for the exact same reasons that were given to the leaders in this state, and they did not have that election. So, it depends how you look at it. I don't know that it is, um, if it is a mystery today, I suspect that mystery won't be for long. We'll know
Yeah,
exactly why. And so, but that's what I would, if I had to give an answer without exactly knowing, that's the one I would give.
got you. Um, Now we're all expecting, and it already has started, a litigation regarding the election by several bodies. But also, can you speak to the action that took place to hold the election and the anticipated disenfranchisement of people of color, low income people, disabled people, and the elderly, and how does that come into
I,
play? Like, we're talking about people's rights,
yeah,
equal access,
I
right?
think, I think, I I think you're going to see a challenge to people who did not receive um, the ballots and requested them. This was squarely in front of the federal judge. That federal judge said that's part of the reason why we need to extend the time so that these people can get their ballots. In fact, I know, and I'm not going to name him, but I know one state representative did not receive his ballot and did not vote. So I can imagine this happened thousands of times all over the state. Now, let's assume you got it. Once you got that ballot, not many people, especially in that are working or that don't have a physical disability. Again, I've run a lot of elections. Absentee ballots, as we all understand and know, are usually given to people who cannot walk to the polls on election day. That's why they were designed. The form still requires that you have a signature, even if you're registered. So I had 10 of my friends who, by the way, were not poor or disenfranchised, were very enfranchised, and were very much powerful. And they said, Pedro, I have to turn this in tomorrow and I have to get a witness. And I said, well, that's what's required. And they said, well, I have to show other people how I'm going to vote.
Mm.
And, you know, again, this goes against the long held tradition in this country where your vote is private.
Yeah.
Now, based on the pandemic, the citizen had to divulge votes that otherwise they wouldn't have. That happened to me 3 or 4 times from people that were on the know, college educated, working people who know exactly what's going on. I think that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Now, to the disenfranchisement of the people overall, I think you're going to have to wait for the evidence to come back. You're going to have to see what the poll numbers showed, what the comparisons were with other elections, and then you'll see more of an impact of other people. Now, also, there were those who didn't sign it and turned in the vote. Now those votes are invalidated. So that's going to be another challenge. These people voted. They weren't, you know, they were essentially say, well, you can have the vote, but you're going to have to do it so absentee ballot. We'll open it up to everyone. I availed myself of the absentee ballot, and I have to say it worked for me, but it didn't work for a lot of people.
Yeah, and there's 2 issues to that I'd like to see if you can address. One is there are identified populations who were told to take extra precautions because of the coronavirus. That was the elderly, the ill, the immune compromised. We'll see if we lost Pedro or he is just um, or if he is just off screen. So I'm going to keep asking the question and see if we can get him back. So the related question would be, what about those populations who were told they couldn't get out to vote? The argument would be, oh, they could have voted absentee ballot. However, one of the other questions that has arisen over these days is, are there laws or regulations that demand a certain amount of notice time when there are changes with an election and a certain manner of ways in which you have to notify people? As we were saying in the show the other day, just because somebody has a press conference or issues a press release doesn't mean that that communication has been given or received by the population. And so what are authorities under obligation to do? I'm going to send a message here to see what's happening with our guests. Looks like we lost them. They'll get back in. I'm going to continue the list of questions that I started before we got Pedro. As soon as he's back, we'll pull him back on the screen. The other questions. Pedro was talking about, what about the people who sent the ballot in without the signature? Because there was a period of time there where folks were told they could send it in by just writing a statement they don't have a witness accessible to them because of the coronavirus, and that they could send it in. So that's a question we'll ask Pedro when he gets back. What happens to the folks who requested and have proof they requested an absentee ballot and never received it? What happens to the folks? Pedro, you're back with us. So I was asking 2 related questions to the whole voting and disenfranchisement. So we have specific populations who were at high risk and were told to take extra precautions. So The easy answer would be they should have voted absentee. But my question about that is two things. One is there was a window of time when one of the courts said people could send in their absentee ballot or one of the administrations without a signature if they stated they didn't have someone available. And then the next day that was overturned. So what happens to the people who sent it in that window time? Can you even tell of all the ballots that came in who did that? That's one question. The other question is, are there laws or administrative rules that mandate a certain amount of notification time when changes are made to an election, whether that's the polling place, the date, the way in which you can vote? Are there any requirements of like due notice for the sake of a term, and the ways in which people need to be notified? Because there's a lot of assumptions here that everybody knows the governor or somebody made a press conference or a press release, and that the average lay person is supposed to just know that. So are there any requirements about amount of notification of change, manner of change, and what happens to the small window, I think it was less than a day, that people were told they could send in their ballot without a signature if they wrote a note there?
That was less than a day, and so this is sort of the difficulty in answering that question. One is I can tell you from experience when even we change a polling site. So if we move it from one school to another school, there's a process. We have hearings, or people decide, they advocate. Maybe we should have one because so many people have to walk down the street as opposed to just having this school across the street. So we go through these these conversations periodically. Those all have to be noticed. What happened here is that the governor thought, and I think rightfully, that he had the power to postpone the election. Um, and the Supreme Court said, no, you don't have that power. Ultimately, the constitutional uh, decider is the Supreme Court. What's going to happen with those ballots is that they're not going to be counted unless they're challenged. So that's why, and I think that's what you're intimating, is that I think there's going to be all sorts of challenges based on people's losing their ability to vote. Now, in this state, I can tell you that the precedent has been that any defect until, and I've been through this many times, every ballot that is received is presumed to be valid unless you can prove it is invalid. And that's the standard and has been in Wisconsin, and that's the standard in case law. So you assume everything is valid until you can prove it is invalid. I don't know what that means for that, and I certainly don't want to prejudge anything that I may have to look at in my court, but that has been sort of the way that has been interpreted throughout all of the, if you think back to recounts when people voted and they were candidates were close and they demanded a recount, you actually have to convince the people that judge this that this vote was so bad, so unpurposefully and wayward that you shouldn't count it. Otherwise, it did count. So it was, if it was even a line or an arrow or something that denoted your preference for a candidate, that would count. Because I think this is the important concept in all of this. And this is what the community and your viewers should understand. Elections are for people, to give the government the authority to govern over them. So therefore, you cannot have a government that's authorized to act unless people participate in those elections. And those elections have to bend to what people need to vote. It would be like if, M&I Bank, I'm sorry, I'm dating myself, BMO, I guess it's called now, or Lincoln Bank or whatever bank would say, say, you know, you can have free checking, but you have to go to Eau Claire to deposit your check. Well, no bank in their right mind would ever do that, right? And this is even more important than that. It's much more important than that. This is our constitutional right to vote. So I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, obviously the court had a lot more information before them than I do now as I answer your question. But I don't think these issues will go away. And
No.
I think there are forces out there that want to that continue to provide additional options for people to participate in elections. I don't know. Look, if I could have all of the people that like me vote in one election, I would love it because I would likely win. Right? But I
Yeah.
have to give everybody the equal opportunity, whether it's the people that favor me or not. I have to win a majority of my neighborhood. That's the way it's always been. Not the majority of the people that I know will vote because they drive a blue car. you know.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really the principle in all of this. I guess I'm not trying to make light of it, but I'm trying to explain it in a way in
Yeah.
which people understand it. This is really about a level playing field where we can give government the permission to rule over us because essentially all these people that we elect essentially make decisions on our behalf.
So, Pedro, what do you think is going to happen with the folks that requested a ballot, have proof that they did within time and didn't receive a ballot to vote?
I'm not going to comment on that. That case may come before me.
Okay. That's a question that Vanessa Vara Ramos is asking.
That's a
Also,
very critical question. That's a really important question.
yeah, and we have people who have proof that they received the ballot that they requested after the election date. We're all gathering all those. A lot of community folks are gathering that evidence. There was um, noted in yesterday's show or the day before forum that there was at least one post office that had a pile of ballots that they weren't able to send out. And so if that's verified, what happens to that vote and those votes. The other example people shared was what happens when folks went to a polling place. Sorry, I'm telling my kid that I can hear him. That's what you hear me doing, scolding. Um, what happens to the people who went to a polling place because they thought that was their polling place, waited in 2 hour line for 2 hours, and then were rejected because they didn't go to that polling place? Do they have any grounds um, to challenge? Of course, anybody can challenge anything about anything. But given the lack of notice, the lack of amount of time of notice and types of notice, that's a situation that we're going to have to address as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think these are all, especially and I think your point is well taken. Excuse me, I'm trying to connect my little station here, but your point is well taken that there was a lot of confusion late in that election. Within a 24-hour period, minds change to what who could vote and what time and where. I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to navigate for the courts and for the people that want their votes counted.
Yeah, those were the big ones from yesterday. The other question is, and maybe you answered it with when they said it didn't qualify for a state of emergency from the governor. But if we needed poll workers, is that a function the National Guard could have provided? And I'm not saying people would have preferred that because we also shared that there was a fear of having military presence and who was actually doing that. But was that an option, or is that only an option in the state of emergency? It looks like we lost Pedro again. We'll wait for him to come back. In the meantime, I want to say hello to Lily Ramos, who's back with us. Hello to Ana Rodriguez. Um, and hello to Vanessa Vara Ramos, who are with us among many of you others. Those are the ones I get to see right now. Uh, what I'd like to do now in these couple of minutes, and we'll see if we can get Pedro back for some final um, thoughts, is to remind you that if you like, um, share this Facebook Live, um, comment or question, mostly here, but in any of the ways you can communicate with us by phone, email, on any of our social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. If you provide a suggestion for a viewer's choice segment, if you show us, demonstrate to us that you voted, and if you demonstrate to us that you uh, completed the census, you can do those things with a selfie or with a screenshot. Um, we will enter you into a drawing for a $25 gift card. And so we want to make sure that you all know who the winner of today's or yesterday's drawing is. And that winner is Vanessa Vara Ramos. And she happens to be on with us. So, Vanessa, what you need to do to claim your prize is to send us an email or contact us by phone and let us share with you the next steps for you to get your $25 gift certificate. We're very thankful for you all being with us. It looks like we may not get Pedro back before the end of the show. We do want to get all your questions answered, and we're collecting all of those, typing them up, and all those concerns and questions that you all have are going to be made public, sharing them with the public, and we'll be sharing them with the authorities that relate to whatever topic of the questions and concerns to see if they'll be on the show or give us a statement as to their answers to there. Again, we want to thank Judge Pedro Colon for being with us today, who provided some very technical and much needed feedback on the election. And hopefully we'll see him again on another topic or on this same topic as well. We want to thank you for being with us today and remind you to come back tomorrow, Monday, for a 3 o'clock with SOC with a special guest, Ed Falone, Marquette University law professor, who'll be chiming in on these topics as well. Thank you. Be safe, and we'll see you Monday.